But this time of year is always a good position to reflect and take stock and also set some goals and try and change your mindset and the way you are going to approach 2023. To get more details on this, we are joined by Dr. Alexandria Proff. She is an assistant professor of education at the American University of Russell Khaimah, where she teaches courses in research, leadership and change. She currently serves as the Education Program Coordinator and Department Chair of Humanities and Social Sciences. Got to take a breath because it's so long. She's an educational leader who has served as a senior administrator in primary, secondary and tertiary education, and she's here to speak about an incredibly important topic, empathy in educational leadership and the key to positivity. Doctor, thank you very much for coming in here on this Friday on TSP.
Thank you for having me.
It's great. It's great to get some insights on this. We talk so much about the idea of showcasing empathy and that role that it plays in our relationships within the workplace and schools and universities. But on a simple level, why is it so hard for so many people to just be kind in the workplace?
Oh, kindness, I think, is an underrated superpower. And I think part of the reason that is people associate kindness with weakness.
They do.
They do. And I certainly think that's not the case. I think you can be quite firm and kind at the same time.
Yeah, because I remember certainly in my early days my early days of relationships, of dating, I was a nice guy.
Oh.
Now, that wasn't a good thing because you can be nice, but you still need to stand up for yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that unfortunately sometimes you are too much of a nice guy, and these weren't just dating relationships, but also in the workplace and things. Sometimes you do have that thing. Well, if I'm really nice, people will respect that. But people do see that as a point of weakness at times, and they take advantage of it.
They do. I think it's a matter of not establishing firm boundaries.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think you can be firm and you can be kind.
People treat you the way you let them treat you.
That's precisely it.
So that's one of the key points. So when we talk about empathy helps us be our most authentic selves and also leaders. How would you define empathy?
So the simplest way to define empathy is to describe it in terms of someone's ability to understand and experience and share in the experience of someone else's perceptions or their feelings and emotions.
So is it as simple as when you, for example, in the workplace, there's an employee whose performance is suffering, they've got attitude problems and they're having difficulty in their relationships with their team members. Good leaders, and I've experienced this as a leader, sometimes you need to take a wide view and go, well, are they okay? I mean, is there something going, because when you make that mistake of being too aggressive up front and then they tell you, oh, I've actually got this unfortunate news, you're like, oh, okay, I've got to backpedal really quickly here. So, I mean, that's always the key step. You've got to really understand that we're humans and sometimes there are a lot of things going on that you may not realise.
That's right. And we have to slow down our judgment. I think people are really quick to draw conclusions, oftentimes with limited information, and that's simply not what good leaders do.
But does that also come down to communication on a two-way street? I mean, sometimes the responsibility is in that, or certainly of the employee, to sometimes put their hand up and communicate and go, hey, I'm going through this. Mm-hmm. This is why I'm not going to be the same for this week.
Yeah, I think, though, in order for people to feel comfortable volunteering information, you have to create a culture within the organization that affirms people's feelings and the way that they're experiencing the world. And if you don't have a culture and leaders who model those behaviors or who value those behaviors, people are going to be really reluctant to share anything, particularly if they feel like it can be perceived negatively.
In the workplace, but also in personal relationships, friends, family members, what are some of the common mistakes that we often make when we try and show empathy?
Oh, there's a couple of big ones, and I am guilty of all of them. I think most of us are. I think that the big one that I see most frequently when I go and I coach leaders or I coach leadership teams is the desire to fix it. So someone comes to you, I'm having this struggle, I'm going through this whatever experience that they're going through, and your immediate response is, okay, how do we resolve this problem? And the reason that's a mistake in empathy is because it takes the shift off of the individual and onto you and your expertise and your ability to solve a problem. It's a common mistake in empathy. It goes from this other person who perhaps just wants to share something with you, wants to let you know, hey, this contextual stuff is happening in my life, and this is how I'm dealing with it. And instead of just being there and being present with this person in this moment, you've reoriented to yourself and made yourself sort of this hero and this fixer.
That must be a really interesting challenge when you're dealing with some of these high profile and really successful people, and they're asking for help with empathy. Are you finding that they're needing skills to deal with other people, or they're more needing coaching and how to be more self-aware?
Oh, self-awareness. That's such a good point that you raise. It's one of the single greatest traits of authentic leaders. So authentic leaders are really self-aware individuals. They understand their own positionality. They understand their own thoughts and words and behaviors. They have a good sense about how other people perceive those things to be, and they understand what their strengths and weaknesses are.
Yeah, because the team I have here on TSB, they're often telling me, and I've learnt to be self-aware, that if I'm looking at my phone or I'm deep in thought, I actually have a really angry face.
Oh, I have that.
So they think sometimes they're upset to approach me, or they think that I'm angry at them. It's just, unfortunately, it's just I'm sitting there thinking of a creative idea, but they're slightly concerned. And I've realised I've got to adhere to that and try and break down that barrier as part of my self-awareness. Yeah.
Yeah, I call it my focus face.
The focus face.
I'm not angry or grumpy at all. I'm just really focused on my book or whatever it is that I'm doing.
How much does someone's experience shape how empathetic they are or aren't?
I think that's an important point. I think it shapes it a lot. And I don't think it's related to age. It's related to experience. So you can find young people who've just sort of been through a lot. If you've ever met someone quite young, but they've gone sort of coped and experienced a great deal of trauma, you'll find sometimes a maturity there, an awareness there that's not always there with other people who have more limited experience. So the experiences that we have both shape and are shaped by our exchanges with other people.
And that can be unfortunate, I think, when you look at young women in particular that may have been through a lot of trauma. They tend to be a lot tougher. I could probably say that for men as well. But trauma can toughen you, but sometimes to a negative level where people think, oh, what's wrong with her? And again, it comes down to us needing to show more empathy to say, actually, maybe she's like this because she's been through a lot of things he or she is not talking about.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah.
And it's individuals. Also, I think each of us individually, our mission is to, as you said, be self-aware and to be on our personal growth journeys. When we're focused on ourselves and we're self-aware, we grow. And when we grow and we are open to learning new things and open to hearing ideas, we're able to become more empathetic individuals.
Yeah, but that's also comes with age. Do you find that people become more empathetic with age, or is it not age, it's the experiences people have gone through?
I think it's experience related. So sometimes those can be the same, right? But sometimes they're not. Sometimes you meet people who are well into their 50s and 60s, lived in the same little town their whole lives, same people, same diners, same food. And those frequently are the same person that they were when they were 25.
I've had many girlfriends tell me I'm immature. You know, we've all experienced it at times. But for anyone who is looking to maybe be more empathetic, what tips have you got for them?
Well, there's two very quick and ready ones. The first one I would say is to respect impact over intent. So what I mean by that is, sometimes the words we use or the actions we have, our focus face, gives people a certain impression about us. Yeah? Sometimes the words we use are perceived in a certain way. Whether you intended to cause someone harm or hurt isn't really the point here. The point here is that harm or hurt was caused. And even if it was unintentional, hopefully it's unintentional, we need to own that space. Not in a way about feeling guilty. It's not about guilt. It's about learning and about growth. As leaders in particular, we want to ensure that the messages that we deliver are received with the intention that we have delivered them. And if we're not aware of how people are perceiving our words, or we're reluctant to adjust, well, that makes our messages very hard to be heard. Yeah,
it's communication and being self-aware. They're key things that we hear about, these aspects and these key buzzwords. But the other aspect is we think, oh, you know what, I talk to people all day. I must be good at communicating. But it may never possibly be the case. When you look at someone and you can understand why they're maybe showing more empathy than others, obviously we can talk about how your behavior and your life experience really can shape that empathy. But do you think, is it a good time this year to put down, I'm never great for New Year's resolutions, but it can be a good time to take stock and think, you know what, next year, 2023, I'm going to aim to just approach things with a more open mind and show more empathy from my initial thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea, particularly as the new year is coming on to us. I think a couple of ways you can do that is to be committed to framing. Now, framing is the way that we view certain events. And oftentimes these can be quite egocentric, not necessarily selfish, but egocentric, oriented on sort of yourself and your own perspectives.
Yeah, because we can be selfish, but obviously there is an element of not being selfish, but just self-interest.
Yes.
and wanting to look after yourself first.
Yep.
Or what's a better solution? Just protecting yourself is probably the best term, as opposed to being selfish. Yeah.
So oftentimes I find it's not selfish. I think people have the tendency to be a little egocentric, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it doesn't do much to promote empathy. So being open to reframing or seeing a situation or a circumstance from someone else's perspective and their vantage point can help you significantly.
That is true, having from that other perspective, because I've had friends that sometimes are too empathetic and they give out too much, and then there's nothing left for them. They never put themselves first. They're constantly giving, and then at the end they're drained and there's no one to look after them. I've seen that side of it as well. Yeah, so it's a fascinating one. For people who do want more information, any advice on either books or literature or things that people can do to maybe help with their empathy or their self-awareness?
Oh, there's lots of books, lots of websites, lots of resources. Empathy is, at least in the literature on leadership, is very big in the world of leadership right now, and not just from the literature side. It's for leaders in industry across disciplines. Empathy is really big right now, and I think it's because it helps people feel safe in a workspace, feel validated, feel valued. When you're able to express empathy, people perceive you as being quite authentic. And when you're authentic, people feel safe because they feel like they can trust you. So there's lots of resources that you can
it's that great American term, the happy worker is a good worker.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, it's been great to get some of your thoughts. I think it's a breath of fresh air when we're focusing on our goals for the next year, to just remind ourselves to, don't be too concerned with having a great Instagram shot for New Year's Eve and getting the right spot for the fireworks, which we can often feel, be guilty of when we're in Dubai, but kind of take that step back and realize, no. Let's kind of set down some goals. And if we put these steps in place, we'll be in 12 months' time going, actually, you know what? Being more empathetic and being more self-aware was possibly the best thing I did for this year.
Yeah, and I think it will ultimately help your performance at work. If you're in a leadership position, it will help your team perform better. And the reality is, when people want to be there, when they buy into the goals that you've set, when they can truthfully and authentically connect with what you're working on, they perform better.
Well, congratulations on all your work that you're doing, and thank you very much for joining us here on TalkSport Business.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's been
Happy
great
New
to
Year.
have you on. Happy New Year. Dr. Alexandria Proff. She is an assistant professor of education at the American University of Russell, Khaimah, where, as you can tell, she teaches courses in research, leadership and change. If you do want more details, you can get in contact with the American University of